Hello and welcome to the Animation Kimmunication podcast, your source for discussion about animation, film, fandom, and more. So please join your host, I Love Kim Possible a Lot, or KP, and Lauren Kizich, the Abbey Roadie, for today's discussion. If you like what you hear, please remember to support by giving a like, a follow, as well as subscribing to the main I Love Kim Possible a Lot channel on YouTube. Spread the word and keep being a part of a great community. This episode is appropriate for all ages.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Animation Kimmunication podcast with your hosts, KP and Lauren, aka the Abbey Roadie. We do have a quick little headline in animation news to bring to you today. As of today's recording, so this will date it, it's going to be May 27th, HBO Max has launched, and so go watch some Looney Tunes cartoons, because that is the new animated content, that brand new animated content that is being heavily pushed on the service right now until more shows basically are dropped, and which will be coming in the next couple months or so. But yeah, it's a really exciting to see HBO Max and all that they're providing. But yeah, go watch some Looney Tunes. A lot of really talented people worked really hard on those incredible cartoons.
Yeah, I'm glad they're doing something with Looney Tunes, where they keep on trying to do stuff with Looney Tunes, because ever since like maybe the 80s, like Disney has always had the upper hand as far as just getting their stuff out. And now, like, if you're my age and or Lauren's age, because we're only a month apart, you probably remember Looney Tunes like in your lifetime from Space Jam, and that's not like stop. So if you haven't been exposed to the classical Looney Tunes shorts, and or I think the new stuff is more stylized to the classic stuff, right?
Yes, it's drawn in the in classic, I want to say like 30s and 40s style of the Looney Tunes. So I guess you could say pre-Chuck Jones and his stylistic approach.
Okay. So you can keep on telling your friends that you're trying to get to listen to this podcast that not every animation thing ever is made by the Walt Disney Company. Thank you. So, God, I remember one time when I was in high school, I was in color guard, which is like the flag twirling BS thing that they give to anyone who wants to, and one of the themes for the show was Prince of Egypt, which I was ecstatic about, because Prince of Egypt is one of my favorite movies. I made a meme about it 2 weeks ago that I sent to Lauren, and then the announcer was like, when they were announcing the thing, they were like, Disney's Prince of Egypt, and I'm like, no, that's not correct. So if in other times I've gotten into fights with people that are just like, why isn't Anastasia on the Disney princess line? And I'm just like, because she's not a Disney princess. And they're like, but she looks like one. And I'm like, that's not how it works, man. So now she's technically one because Disney bought Fox, but before that she wasn't. So, people need to educate themselves. Okay, I think I'm done.
Okay, yeah. So that concludes our little headline here. And now time to segue into our guest for tonight.
I hope you enjoyed my Disney rant. My mini Disney rant.
Yeah, that's good. But today we have a very special guest, one of my good buddies in the industry, and he has run the gamut with Disney, Warner Brothers, you name him. He's an incredibly talented storyboard artist, an illustrator, a character designer, and he's got a lot to say. So everybody meet Chad Frye. How are you doing, Chad?
Hi, I'm good.
Good to hear.
That's a lot of pressure.
He also has a really cool beard, I'll add that.
Yeah.
It's like when we were doing the headshot, we were saying the headshot, Lauren's like, no, we need to have the beard. It needs to be more like, so you'll get that soon.
Because every one of our guests gets a headshot, basically done in an art style, and we wanted to do a little something green eggs and hammy for you, so we got you a green eggs and ham avatar.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. And so really happy to have you here, Chad. And how you feeling?
I'm all right. It's been a little weird with all the lockdown, but here we are.
Yeah, I was gonna say like the whole industry's had to like adapt to this, working from home. And actually, what's good is it seems like animation's been doing really well actually in the middle of quarantine because with live action on hold, animation's been steamrolling ahead. So
Mm,
Yeah,
it's very true.
WIA has predicted that this will allow like more like non-traditional like women with very small children and stuff like that to enter the industry because they can now, or they're hoping that there's more of a permanent shift to working towards home. But I'm just like, we'll see what happens. I'm sure studios want to save money by like not having office space, but I'm not sure. Like, I'm the last person to ask if that's practical or not. So
Well, we all have to pay for our own office space, so if we're working at home.
yeah,
it's fair.
no in-office snacks that are paid for by the company. We are the company.
That's right. I eat a lot fewer snacks now.
Tell me about it.
When they run out, they run out.
Yeah, it's another just another Costco run or something.
You can't send the PA to Costco. You got to go yourself with your mask.
Yep.
All right.
Only I could afford a PA.
Okay, Lauren, I'll let you lead since it's your contact, and I will ask questions and be rude as they come up.
Yeah, go ahead.
We'll only get through half of them, and it'll be great.
Yeah. Okay, so to start off, because I have some questions here lined up for you, but let's go with the basics here. Like, we have a lot of young listeners and a lot of people who want to get into the industry or are young in the industry, or want to get into it. So, what is a storyboard artist, and what is the responsibility of a storyboard artist?
Well, all right. I think we can talk for the next half hour about that. Doing storyboards is basically plotting out a whole show or the movie in drawings before it gets to animation. So the storyboard artist has to, they work with the writers, the directors, and sometimes they have the audio recordings of the actors already, and they're basically plotting out camera moves. If there isn't already set design, they're kind of designing sets in a rudimentary way, all to plot the action for animation, which is much cheaper than actually animating it and figuring it out later. So it's kind of like creating the blueprint for the final show.
Yeah. I was going to say, how much say in creative say do you have as storyboard artists? Because, I mean, you visually have to steer what's going on. So how much say do you have in that?
That all depends on what production you're on and how the individual productions want to work. I was on a movie once where we were just given script outlines, not actual scripts. So I was actually writing all the dialogue. And working with a team of storyboard artists, it was great because there was a lot of chatter back and forth, and we were talking about all kinds of stuff, and a lot of that would feed into the story. So there was a lot of freedom on that one. But more typical is that you have a pretty strict script, and your production wants you to stick to what is actually in the script. Sometimes you can make suggestions for dialogue changes because writers are not always totally thinking of things in the visual. So sometimes you can cut dialogue, and sometimes you can change dialogue to pertain closer to what's happening in the visuals of the scene. But all that usually has to go through your director first. You can't just make changes and not tell anybody. You have to get them approved. So it depends on the production. Last thing I worked on, things were pretty tight, and I had to pretty much stick exactly to the script.
Yeah.
With very little external input on making changes. And that's fine. I don't mind working however they want to work, but sometimes it's just better for the story if you can let your storyboard artist make suggestions that will help the flow go a little bit better. That's not always thought of when the script is being written. So it is a visual medium. So there's got to be a little bit of back and forth to make it exactly the way it should be for the final to look good. So but you work as a team, so it's not just one person. You're working with lots of people.
Right.
And it all has to be on model now.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, goodness. If it was all put onto one person, no way. We'd be losing our hair.
Well, that also depends on the production as well. So some places don't care if it's exactly on model. Other places do. I think sometimes the thing that's most important when you're storyboarding is making sure size relationships between characters are on model, even if their actual look is not necessarily perfectly on model. So,
Right.
but
It has to be identifiable enough that you know who is who on the screen.
yeah, but I worked on I did some storyboard revisions a long time ago on Mickey Mouse Clubhouse,
Mm-hmm.
and the board artist I was revising stuff for, he drew Mickey and Donald at two different sizes. Well, everybody knows what Mickey and Donald look like, so there's no problem distinguishing between the two. But they're actually the same height. So one of the things I had to do is go in and transform all the height to be equal between the two of them. So
Oh dear.
that's what I mean by the size relationships. You got to make sure those are accurate in your boards, especially if you're dealing with CG characters later, because there's no fudging that. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's all fun, but it's various challenges come up any which way you look at it. So
Yeah, I was going
yeah.
to say there's a whole process in creating storyboards and, having to get them reviewed. So how about you go through the process of creating a storyboard and maybe even if there is a little bit about the approval process and what it takes.
Oh yeah. Well, like I said, it usually starts with a script, and on some shows that are have their pre-production down a little bit better, you'll get audio tracks from the actors as well. Sometimes it's just scratch tracks, and if people don't know what scratch tracks are, that's just when somebody else, maybe somebody who just works in the office, goes into the recording room and records some of the dialogue as the directors wish, and then later it gets recorded for real by the actual actors. But having that helps as well because the vocal performance really changes how the physical performance is going to look in even in animation. So, but I'd say half the time I'm storyboarding without any vocal tracks at all. I just have the written word on the script page. So then you have to imagine all the attitudes and everything. But the way it starts is with the script, and then you're going to rough it out.
Mm-hmm.
You draw out some of the more key moments. You don't necessarily make it all smooth yet, and they can be really rough, depending on how your director wants it to look. But because then you'll show it to the director or a storyboard supervisor, who will then give you some notes, and you might do another rough pass. You might just alter the rough pass you already have. But once they like your rough pass, then you got to go in and do all the extra drawings that you're posing everything out a little bit more, making sure everything is a little more on model as the show dictates. And this is when you're going to put in some tones, to shading tones, if it's necessary for storytelling, all that. But that's something too. The boards are usually done in black and white unless color is a specific story point, because storyboard artists, we're not actually designing the film, but what we do informs the other steps in the pipeline. So sometimes background design is already started, especially if you're on a series and there's reused backgrounds and stuff. So you'll board based on those, but other times backgrounds don't exist and you're kind of coming up with how they might look like in a very general way. And then a layout designer is going to come along and design the sets after you. So like I said earlier, there's a lot of back and forth to make sure everything starts getting done in a good way. So most of the
Yeah.
character designs are already done in advance too, so you have those, except for not necessarily miscellaneous characters. Sometimes those background characters don't exist until the board artist is putting them in.
Right.
Then later the character designer will go and design them, or they'll figure out pre-existing background characters that they'll use.
I'm
So
pretty sure
there's
that's
a lot
how you
of
get a lot of Easter egg characters in the background. Is a board artist somewhere is just like, that's why we, with KP and I, we kind of will have more or less a connection with the whole My Little Pony fandom, and so with
yeah.
a lot with the fandom, they've always been about who are these background characters, because it seems like the board artists had like a crazy time, just like they not only made new characters, but then they made like cameo characters. So Rick and Morty showed up at one point in the background as ponies, and you had I even had at one point there was an episode where it was all about background characters suddenly being brought to the forefront in a one-off story. And there are all these visual gags that I'm like, I can only imagine the storyboard artists were just having a heyday with it. Pardon the pun.
Nice, yeah, yeah. Seriously, yeah, that can happen for sure with storyboarding. You come up with little visual jokes, little visual character things, and those things can become bigger things later. It might inspire somebody else down the pipeline and doing something even bigger. So, yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. And you mentioned like everything being done in black and white except for color, and I guess that would segue into programs or materials. Like, what do you use or recommend using for storyboarding?
Well, when I first did storyboarding, it was always on paper. Obviously, that's changed a lot in the last, really in the last 12 years.
Yeah.
When Cintiqs became a lot more user-friendly, then all of a sudden the studio started changing over to digital boards, which I prefer, quite frankly, because you can resize and really get to play around with your composition a lot more than you could when you were just trying to work it out on paper.
Mm-hmm.
But Photoshop is what I use mostly.
Okay.
Yeah, there's so far, I know a lot of places use the program Storyboard Pro, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But so far, wherever I've worked, I haven't had to use that. But I see that mentioned a lot now in job listings. So I've played around with it. When I was on Green Eggs and Ham, it was on my computer, but we used Photoshop on that show. So
Oh, really?
I didn't. Yeah, because they used Flix as a organizing program for all the storyboards. So on Green Eggs and Ham, I was the revisionist for season 2, and when you use Flix, it'll save the Photoshop files with all the layers into the system, and then somebody like me comes along and I can open it up and alter layers instead of dealing with just flat artwork. So that's just how they chose to do it. But I know other shows at Warner Brothers were using Storyboard Pro. But I'm not sure. Boy, when I boarded at Disney, it was all on paper still, so that was pre-digital. But I've worked at independent studios like Splash Entertainment out in Woodland Hills, and we used Photoshop out there as well. So
yeah, see, to all the artists out there, you can do it. If you have Photoshop or any of those programs, you can do it. You don't need Storyboard Pro right out of the gate. It's okay. You can do Photoshop, and Fire Alpaca, any of those programs, really.
Yeah, especially if you're doing your own project, do whatever you want, But
you're your own boss.
Yeah, but I do think the industry standards are both Storyboard Pro and Photoshop. They're both probably used equally as much out there in the industry. So,
no, that's good to know.
There are some places that want you to storyboard in Flash.
What?
Really?
Yeah, I had been asked that for production at a particular studio, and they do a lot of their shows in Flash, and they were asking their board artists to work in Flash as well. And I don't know Flash. I actually don't enjoy working in vector because I like to draw. So, and I know Storyboard Pro is a vector-based program, but it lets you draw. So, yeah, I couldn't do the Flash show. I think too, though, that sometimes when a studio wants you to board in Flash, in a way they're kind of using you as a animation key artist. So they're trying to get 2 jobs out of you at once. because they can just take your Flash files. They're already on model because you're using the models, and then they can just go and animate in between your storyboard drawings. So I think that's kind of the benefit that is for a studio. Not so much a benefit for the artist, but it's a benefit for the studio.
Yeah. I was going to say with how often have you had to, because I mean, there are animatic people, animatic editors. How often have you had to do animatics with your own boards?
Oh, I never have when I'm working for a production. Obviously, if I'm coming up with my own thing on my own time, then yeah, I do my own. But
Okay.
or I'll ask an editor friend to help me. But not in house. I never have. Yeah.
Okay.
It's funny you asked that because when I played around with Storyboard Pro and I was using it in my spare time to learn it, and I saw how you can really create your own animatic in there with moving dialogue and cutting and even putting camera moves that previously you'd only see that in a real editing suite. I asked one of our editors on Green Eggs and Ham. I was like, "So you've worked on shows before that have Storyboard Pro?" And he goes, "Yeah." I said, "What do you do when the storyboard artist has worked all this editing stuff into his drawings in Storyboard Pro?" He says, "Well, I import the drawings, throw out all that stuff, and I do what I want." So if a show is making you do your own editing when you're a storyboard artist, probably good to go talk to the editor and find out what it is exactly that they need. Because no use in putting all that time into it if they're just going to throw it out. So
Yeah.
so
Well, it's good
but
to know.
really, we have to think about editing when we're drawing. We're not editors. That's not what we're trained in. There is a certain art to that. So it depends. It depends on how a studio might want to be economical by having people do multiple types of things. But I don't know. Editors are good at what they do.
Yeah. Yeah, I was wondering because, with all of your many projects that you've worked on over the years, what were some favorite scenes or moments, maybe even sequences, that you got to board?
Before we go into that, can you name all of his projects so people know?
Yeah, I was gonna say, okay, so just to name a few, we've already talked. You've worked on Green Eggs and Ham for season 2, which yes, there is a season 2 coming. People, if you haven't seen any updates from that, yes, season 2 is greenlit and it's happening and it'll happen.
And that's public information. We're not revealing anything new and saying that. So
right,
otherwise,
exactly.
I probably will have people wearing dark suits coming to my door tonight to get after me for that if we were revealing any secrets.
Yeah, but you and Chad has also worked on Mulan. He's worked on Tarzan, Emperor's New Groove, Atlantis, Treasure Planet. Mickey Mouse Clubhouse we talked about. Actually, and you've also worked on Scooby Doo and Guess Who, Lala Loopsy, stuff for Zuzu Pets. You've run the gamut on a whole bunch of stuff. So.
Yeah, and keep in mind too, I do several different things. So I haven't been a storyboard artist on all those projects.
Right.
Just some of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say because you were like a character designer with Scooby Doo as well, right?
Yeah, as a freelancer, I did some character designs for a couple episodes on that. I think Steven Silver did most of the character designs on it, and I'm not sure. I think they had somebody else doing character designs for some of the other cartoony characters. So, yeah, but there were a bunch of people on that show.
Yeah, you were a revisionist also on Animal Crackers, right?
Yes, which I saw today on Tony Bancroft's Instagram feed that it's coming to Netflix this year. So,
really? Wow, that news just broke, huh?
I just saw it today.
Wow.
Yeah, he made it public. So
there you go, guys. I know that
so,
for anybody who has been kept abreast of Animal Crackers, if you know Tony Bancroft from Disney fame of Tom and Tony Bancroft, the animators who worked, the twin brothers who worked together at Disney. Tony, he directed this movie called Animal Crackers, and it's a gorgeous looking movie. I'm so excited to now know like we were seeing it, and it went through distribution hell pretty much, as if anybody was kept up with the news on that it was a long battle to get it released outside of, I think it was China. It was released in China initially, and they were hoping to release it everywhere else, but there was a whole mess trying to get it to be distributed elsewhere. So now we got it. Now we got it on Netflix, baby.
That's the joys of independent filmmaking. The distribution was really messed up. Yeah, trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
So I had nothing to do with any of that business side of it. I was just working with Tony on doing storyboard revisions for the film when it was. We did that in 2015. It's been done for a while. I think the movie was finished in 2016 sometime.
Wow.
So.
Yeah, and it was trying to get out there.
Yeah, and I've seen it. I really liked it. I thought it was a beautiful film, especially when you consider it was an independent film. It's really top level for what you see independent films that come out. So I'm happy to have worked on it, and I like it very much. Yeah. I'm glad everybody will finally get a chance to see it.
I guess especially when Netflix took a chance with Klaus and had like major success with it. This is really good news for Animal Crackers, which, if I recall, that was also animated out of Spain, correct? Out of a studio in Spain.
Yes, yeah, it was done in Spain.
Yeah, so it's like it's great to see Netflix backing up these projects and going like, yeah, let's give you guys an audience, and Animal Crackers more than deserves it after all of this. And it's just like every time I see it on my Facebook or Instagram feed, anything of it, it was like I was always so excited to see it. It was I think the only panel I wanted to go to. The first time I ever attended CTN in 2015 was the Animal Crackers panel, but I didn't have a pass to get in. And and actually our buddy Rick, he tried to get me into that panel with a guest pass, and they still wouldn't let me in. It was like,
what?
I know. It was that, and I was a very sad panda sitting outside the room.
I'm sorry. There was a public screening of it out in Calabasas a couple of years ago, and I think the auditorium was more than half empty because nobody really knew about it. So
I would have been there.
Yeah. That's how I saw it. Actually, was at that screening. So.
Oh man, yeah. So I'm really excited to hear that. That's great news. Wow, to hear that. Yeah, wow.
A little interesting trivia. I believe the Animal Crackers, even though it's coming out now, it was the first time that our two leads had worked together, John Krasinski and Emily Blunt, who of course are husband and wife.
Yes.
And I mean, A Quiet Place came out already, and I know they're working on the sequel to that, but I don't think they had worked together on an actual project until they were recording for us. So
yeah,
and they did it together, which was fun. I was in the recording room watching them go at it. It was usually you don't see actors working together for animation, but they did, and it really pays off in the film. There's a lot better interaction, I think.
That's really cute. And I remember the headlines talking about Animal Crackers being their first one to work on together as as husband and wife. And it was just like, and then I saw Quiet Place, queued up right there, and then it made it to the US cinemas first. And I'm like, oh, come on. Animal Crackers had that title first. Stop it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, technically it was released in China, but I don't know if it was dubbed into Chinese over there.
Oh, yeah?
I have no idea. I don't know if they used the American voices or not when they showed it in China.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But yeah, it's got a terrific cast besides them. And there's a lot of other great people in it too. So they really put a lot into it and getting good people involved. So it'll be fun to see.
Yeah, one of these days, Lauren, we have to do an episode about like casting for indie films. I think that would be interesting because it depends a lot on the actor's like preference, and sometimes you can get away with getting like big people on indie stuff, and I'm like, how do you do it? So
very
sneakily. It's called money. Though, something I learned a long time ago is that you never get anything if you don't ask.
Yeah.
So if you have a way to an actor's agent, it doesn't hurt to just ask. And I don't know, I'm not privy to the knowledge of how actors were acquired for a lot of the projects I've worked on, but um, sometimes they work for scale. Sometimes they do it for a favor. Sometimes, you'll see big actors' names on a animated film, and maybe to them it was only one day of work.
Mm-hmm.
So for them, it was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it for a few $1,000. It's one day, no big deal, and they don't have to get into makeup or costumes, and then you get a great voice in a project, and it didn't cost you as much as you might have thought. A lot of people, especially if they have kids, they want to do this kind of stuff too. So you never know. It never hurts to ask. That's the point of it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, KP. You go first.
I was just gonna ask you what the next question was, but did.
So your question was to ask what the next question was. Huh.
I mean, you can talk more about your Disney stuff. I'm always down for that.
My Disney stuff.
Any fun stories?
Well, my first job in animation in Hollywood was working at Disney Feature Animation on Mulan, and I was just a kid in the candy store because there were at that time everybody that was part of the animation revolution in the 90s was still there.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all the names of people that I had admired when I was coming up through the ranks and trying to find my way into Disney. So it was thrilling to be able to work with people like Glenn Keane and Mark Henn. Mark is still there, thankfully. Eric Goldberg, Russ Edmonds was there then. It's like all these people were there, and it was just terrific to get to be there and walk the halls with them and see their work in the dailies or the development artists that were working there. I mean, that's how I met Peter DeSev for the first time. As he came in house for a week to work on Treasure Planet, I think. And man, I was a big fan of his, and I heard he was in the building for a week, so I went up and bugged him. But there were also some of the, not to be disparaging to use the term old timers, but some of the old timers were still there, like guys like Joe Grant, who had been involved in designing stuff for Snow White.
Wow.
He was working there. There was Vance Gary was still there, who had been a storyboard artist in the days of Walt. There were people like that were still there too. A lot of them have passed away since then, of course, because I started working there in 1997. So, but yeah, so I got to work with those people and around those people, and I was there for the tail end of the glory years of 2D animation, and it was just thrilling for me to be part of that and to watch all that happening around me. So, yeah, Joe Grant, he was the best though. Oh man, he had a real old school approach to working in animation, but he also, I don't know how he was with other people. I think I've heard stories that are similar, but he was very encouraging to me because he knew I wanted so badly to get into production work. And he was constantly trying to be a mentor to me without me even realizing it until after I was gone. Sometimes he would use it because I was working there as a teacher of computer programs. I was there to help show artists how to use the computer for artistic purposes because that was all kind of new back then. I think when I started there, Photoshop was in its first version.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So there was programs like Photoshop, and then I was also learning a lot of the in-house software and was there to teach artists how to use that. And Joe would call me and go, "Hey, Chad, I'm having trouble with my computer. Can you come up and show me something?" So I'd go up to Joe's office and, okay, we talk about his computer for a minute, and then he said, "Well, I got this idea here." He says, "Yeah, why don't you take a look at this and see how you can expand on that?" And he would give me little homework assignments of sorts, which I absolutely loved, and I loved him so much, that I was happy to do all that. It was like Daniel in the Karate Kid who had to go fix the porch, yet he didn't realize he was learning karate all at the same time. So that's kind of what it was. Joe was teaching me design and storytelling without me fully realizing it in the moment. So it was great.
No, that's amazing. Yeah, you were there at literally the best time to
Yeah,
catch everybody there. Um,
yeah.
and actually, I was gonna say, KP, one of your favorite movies is Treasure Planet. So,
Yeah, I didn't want to bring that up because then the whole podcast will be about that.
You know, about 3 or 4 years ago, I went on a camping trip in the middle of nowhere in Russia.
Hmm.
And I know that's a weird story to start with, but
No, I'm intrigued. Tell more,
but
please.
yes, but what was even stranger, there were only a couple people in the group who spoke English, um, so they were always translating what people wanted to say to me in the middle of nowhere. Um, but of all the crazy things, somebody came up to me and asked me if I could draw them John Silver from Treasure Planet.
Oh, wow.
So I did post that drawing on Instagram, and it just I took a photo of it in the woods. But of all the things in this remote location in Russia, somebody asking me for a drawing of John Silver.
That's great.
Yeah,
Everyone go
and
watch Treasure Planet on Disney Plus.
yeah, I'm glad it's there. It's weird. Everything I ever worked on at Disney is currently on Disney Plus. So
Yeah, and I
what?
guess word has come out with with the live adaptation news from, especially because you worked on Atlantis, that there was the live action adaptation of Atlantis coming. How do you feel about that? I know
Um,
everything's getting a live action adaptation these days, but
I well, and Mulan, being the first one I was a part of, that's already done, I guess, and just waiting for release now. But
Mhm.
um, I guess it makes me feel old. It doesn't feel like it was that long ago, but for stuff that I worked on to already be getting remade, I thought that was supposed to happen like 50 years later, not 20 years later.
Yeah, it really wasn't that long ago. Because I mean,
No.
I remember seeing it in theaters when I was a kid. I was out in Palm Desert when I saw it. I saw it at the Mary Pickford Theater out there. That's what I remember. That clear as day. So it's just like it
Wow.
just does not feel like that long ago.
Yeah, it really wasn't. But here we have it. I guess they're making money with them, so you know. The thing with Atlantis, though, is that um, the story guys really came up with a lot of really cool stuff, and because of the cost of animation, um, so much stuff got cut out of that film because it just was
Mm.
impossible to really be able to afford to make it. So I remember there were great sequences that were in story, and I don't know, I don't know if they really cut so much out after animation, but there were things that I wish had stayed in the story. Um, so there's a lot of meat there that I think a live action movie could probably do justice with.
Mm.
Um, and it also would be different enough from the animation that it would just be another product, not necessarily a full-on remake, I guess. So
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's just a
so
new
we'll
way of
see.
saying it.
Yeah, well, the part of the thing with animation that I love so much is the artistic style, and
Mhm.
that's something, especially there towards the end of 2D at Disney, that was being done. Every movie had its own style,
Mhm.
and Atlantis, boy, what a gorgeous film that was.
Mhm.
Um, Kind of riffing on Mike Mignola's comic book style for that, and Mike even was brought in to do some design work after they had already started on the film. And for those of you who don't know, Mike is the creator of Hellboy in comic
Mhm.
books. Um, so it really had his unique look to it, and that was such an interesting approach for animation. I thought it really worked well, especially with that story, especially with those submarines and stuff. Oh, it just looked fantastic.
Oh yeah.
So
It seemed like around that time, as the 2000s were rolling around, um, it was cool to see these films with it still felt Disney, but it was still like a new look, a new aesthetic stylistically to each film that felt like here's the new millennium and here's our new style, which I thought was really cool. It was, and with Atlantis and Treasure Planet coming out of the gate way more mature in terms of story and way darker, but especially Atlantis, but at the same time still being so immersed in fantasy that you're just like, yeah, I'm here for the ride. I love every second of it. It was it
was very cool.
And so
I every once in a while I'll do drawing events, where you go to a school or doing something at a children's hospital or something and drawing. And it was like 2-3 years ago. I did one at Walt Disney Elementary School, not associated with the company. It's actually a school here in Burbank named after Walt Disney. And most kids come up and they'll ask, oh, draw me Mickey Mouse, or can you draw me Ariel or something like that. This one kid came up and he says, draw me the Leviathan from Atlantis. And I was like, I'm sorry. That wasn't drawn in the movie, right? That was CG.
It was CG with a 2D overlay.
Yeah. I think that comment went over his head, but he was like, well, I don't have data on my phone. I don't pay for internet when I'm roaming around. I said, I'm sorry, I can't look it up. And the kid says, oh, no problem. And he pulls out his phone, looks it up, and says, here you go. So 20 minutes later, the kid got a version of the Leviathan. And I think I only had time for like 2 more kids after that. So
That's a kid that deserved to be at Walt Disney Elementary.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
This kid knows what's up.
Yeah, what 3rd grader knows to come up and ask for the Leviathan from Atlantis? So, yeah. And that was before Disney Plus, so he had to have had a copy at home somehow.
Oh, yeah. Or like the one of those, the silver, platinum, or diamond edition, whatever edition of those DVDs it was.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'd have to look up if they ever got to like the odd stepchildren as far as those like Atlantis and Treasure Planet and like Home on the Range, if they had like 25 anniversary editions for this thing that the studio doesn't like to remember. So
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, Home on the Range, that was the last one I was a part of there. So
how was it on the production team with that movie?
That one went through a lot of changes. I mean, it's no secret. It originally was Sweating Bullets, and under that title, it had a completely different story. So, I don't know. I mean, I always loved the style of that film, but it kept getting pulled in different directions until we got what we ended up with. So, I love westerns, and I was excited to be a part of an animated western in my capacity at the studio, but then since that was the last one for me, it was weird because that was the first time I had to, I left, and then I had to be invited back for the crew party, and that's when I finally got to see how it turned out. So yeah, it's different. I wish that there were elements from the original story that could have been kept, and because there were things about that I think got some of us excited. So, because Slim and the Willies, they were originally going to be ghosts.
Really?
And I always thought that would have been a very cool way of telling the story. They were kind of like that Ghost Riders in the Sky song.
Oh, awesome! Yeah.
They were still cattle rustlers and stuff, but they were ghosts, and I thought that would have been a really interesting approach to telling the story, and it would have been really fun in animation. So
yeah, I was, because it's funny because you can tell there was promise there for their characters, and just imagine like pushing that into ghosts would have been like, that would have been a whole other thing, like especially when you can't catch a ghost and they're rustlers. So how do you work around that? That brings up whole other questions. So it's which I think that adds to the fun of it.
I think that was actually the question that came up in executive meetings and was part of their demise. So How do you catch a ghost? I don't know. They figured it out in
I
Ghostbusters.
was just gonna be like, yeah, call Ghostbusters. Call Danny Phantom.
That's right.
The cows cross the streams.
I'm not sure I want to know what that means exactly. So, yeah. Yeah. It was fun. It was really fun to be there, no matter what we were working on. So.
Yeah, and also my personal favorite, just one more, is that Emperor's New Groove. That's one of my absolute favorites.
Oh.
Please, if you have any stories of that production, I know it went through its own changes. So.
Yeah, well, every once in a while, that documentary they made shows up on YouTube called
The Sweatbox.
Box. Yeah, that was pretty accurate. I'm not actually in the documentary, but I was in some of the meetings that were filmed that are in that. So that was definitely an interesting journey. Again, another movie where the way it started was a completely different story. In fact, I think most people, if they listen to the soundtrack, they're like, what are all these songs? Well, those were all songs from the original movie that never got made.
Mm-hmm.
So,
especially with Sting,
yeah.
he was supposed to have way more songs in it. So,
yeah, it was fun watching progress screenings along the way because Sting actually had recorded all the demos originally. So those are what we would hear in employee progress screenings. But then eventually for the album, they had other people record them. So
I was gonna say, didn't Sting rage quit after essentially they weren't doing the original storyline?
I'm not in the know on that part of it. So he still wrote that opening song that's in the movie that Tom Jones recorded. So.
Which is a great opening number. I mean, again, that's one of my absolute favorite Disney movies, and especially because it was so tonally different from every other Disney movie that preceded it. It was because it came in this is a straight up buddy comedy with adult jokes and fourth wall breaking, and it just it didn't care, and that was what was fun about it. And even acknowledging its own flaws. That's still one of my favorite gags is where Yzma and Kronk fall in the river, and then they somehow end up at the lab before Kronk and before Cusco and Pacha get there, and Kronk's just by all accounts, it doesn't make any sense how we did that.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun. That movie answers the question: what if Disney made a Looney Tunes cartoon? And it was weird because when it came out, and I don't know if you remember this, but when it came out, it really didn't do that well in the theaters. And most people discovered it when it came out on home video and DVD. So it took off after that. People would, I heard about, teenagers getting together for watch parties at people's homes for it and stuff like that. So I was glad that it finally got an audience. But I do think part of the problem, I don't know, I'm sure that everything's on YouTube these days, right? So if you see some of those early trailers for it, I don't think the trailers helped very much because I recall our impression when they showed us the first trailer in dailies one day was that it gave all the punchlines to jokes, but it didn't have any of the setups, so it didn't look very funny in the commercial. If you don't have a setup, then what good is a punchline? So the punchline serves as a nice, see, here's good storytelling technique. The punchline serves as the delivery of as the surprise for what the setup was. So if all you get is the surprise, you don't know that you were supposed to be scared, at first. So so that's what the first trailer did, and I think a lot of people saw that and they were like, I don't know. I forget what came right before that, but probably something way more serious than that comedy. So it wasn't something I think people were expecting from Disney.
Yeah.
But boy, more than anything I've worked on, that's the one that most people have told me they like a lot. So that's very cool. It's very cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was with with the whole marketing of movies like that. I call it Iron Gianting because of what happened to Iron Giant in that poor movie, which fortunately it got its following in later years.
Oh,
Now
yeah.
it's like a highly acclaimed movie, but the marketing did not do it any service at all at the time. And so, and that's just a shame, but it's always good to see when the right followings come in, over time, and soon it gets the recognition it deserves. And with
Yeah.
Emperor's New Groove, I'm really happy for that.
Well, if Emperor's New Groove hadn't gotten that audience on home video, um, I don't think. I mean, remember there was the Emperor's New School TV show that came along afterwards, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they even started talking about that until all of a sudden they realized the home video was taking off like hotcakes. So, and then that show lasted quite a while.
Yeah, it lasted like 2 seasons.
Was it only 2
I
seasons?
think it was more. I think it was like 3 or 4 seasons. Actually,
Really?
yeah, quite a while. Yeah.
Okay.
I thought maybe because most Disney TV animated shows usually are only 3 seasons, but I thought New School went for more than that. I could be
Yeah.
mistaken.
I'm
I
gonna
think it went
Google
for about 4 seasons. It
Yeah.
ran for a really long time, and that's a long time for Cusco to be back in school. But
Hey, I was done in 4 years too. That was enough.
he went through his 4 years of high school.
That's
He's all
right.
caught up now. Good boy.
Indeed.
But yeah, I see that it's getting closer to your time. I don't want to take too much of your time, but I do have
Oh
one.
no, it's all right.
You're good.
We can keep going. Yeah, I'm good.
I was gonna say I did have a question. I don't know how much you can disclose about Green Eggs and Ham, but how about your first impressions of the first season that came out?
Oh, it's funny. I work on these things, but I don't necessarily have the channels that they air on. So, um, I did see 2 finished episodes of season 1, and other than that, the rest of them I saw while I was on the job as storyboard animatics. And I thought season 1 was really a lot of fun. Some very funny stuff. I think my favorite character was John Turturro's goat.
Yes.
Man, when I saw that, even just in animatic form, I was sitting at my desk laughing out loud. So I couldn't wait. I guess I still have to wait because I haven't seen that episode in its finished form. But yeah, season 1 was kind of a surprise. Because prior to this, most Dr. Seuss stuff were either single movies or television specials,
Mm-hmm.
or then you had like the Wubulous World of Dr. Seuss, which was a puppet show, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you didn't really have something like this, and it, while it was Seuss, it didn't. And I don't think Dr. Seuss himself ever truly talked down to children, but so much in animation for TV does, and I think Seuss was more, or Green Eggs was made for more all ages, and I know my nephews and my sister watches it with her kids, and she enjoyed it. Even my mom sat there and watched some of it and was laughing. So I was really proud of it. Even though I didn't work on season 1, I'm excited for people to see season 2 now whenever the team gets finished with it. So
Yeah.
You adopted it.
what's that?
I said you adopted it.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, I'm a proud parent. I guess I should say I'm more of a proud uncle to season 1, since I didn't have anything to do with its birth. But yeah, season 2 is gonna. I can't say anything specific about it, of course, but
Right.
it's gonna be a lot of fun. There's a lot more fun surprises. The writing is really snappy, and I think you asked earlier about a favorite scene that I've worked on. Probably it's in season 2 of Green Eggs and Ham. So I wish I could tell you about it, but I can't. So
I'm
yeah.
excited now. Thank you for that.
We got a little bit. We'll take that.
You have my feelings on it, but I can't tell you any specific things about the
Yeah.
story.
That's better than nothing.
And so,
Yeah,
I guess that's a great note to actually close on with one more final question.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for young artists who may want to pursue becoming storyboard artists?
Do it. Especially with the way technology is so accessible to everybody today. Most kids who desire a career in animation have access to things that they can work with, you know. Um, so even if you don't have a computer, you can still draw storyboards on paper. Nobody says you can't do that. Paper still exists and pencils still exist. So it's definitely old school, but they're there. But yeah, just keep doing it and practicing and watch whatever you can about it, because storyboarding is not something you see a lot in print. A lot of our work, you don't really, people never truly see what we exactly drew. They'll see the end result after teams of people have worked on it. I think, I mean, there are some books on storyboarding. I know there was Paper Dreams was one that John Kaymaker wrote about Disney storyboarding from the old school days. And you'll see small snippets of them in some of the Art of books, but something that really alerted me to what storyboarding could be was the Beauty and the Beast Laserdisc, which I believe they put on one of the Blu-rays or DVDs, so it's out there in that format too. But what'd they call it? It was called Beauty and the Beast Work in Progress, I think. And it was a story animatic. It really was. It was. If you haven't seen it, you definitely got to check it out. But they showed you the entire movie with sound and dialogue, but it was done with storyboards. Some of it's rough animation, some of it are final shots. But it's basically kind of how we would see an animated movie halfway through the process. We would have screenings like that in the studio, where we would see the progress of the film, and it was like exactly like that. It would be storyboards. Some of it's rough animation, some of it's finished, some of it's in color, and you can really get a good sense of what storyboarding is by watching an animatic like that. And that's one that was released publicly, so you can definitely check that out on some past release of Beauty and the Beast. So, but other than that, it's kind of tough. I mean, you'll see little clips here and there sometimes from people putting on YouTube, but if you can find a story reel like that, then watch it and just pay attention. And a lot of it is really understanding filmmaking. You know, when you're watching movies, live action movies, don't just, and this is key for storyboarding people specifically, don't just watch the story and be entertained by it. Sit there and analyze it. Where was the camera placed? Why was that important? If the camera is moving, if it's shifting a little bit, if it's handheld, or if it's a huge pan or a big pivot or any of those things, why was it done that way for the sake of storytelling? Because every one of those choices is a storytelling choice. And that's what a storyboard artist has to do. We're not just interpreting directly the acting that's on the printed page of the script, but we're making it as cinematic as we can, because we have to think of it through the eyes of a camera. And that is one of the biggest parts of storyboarding, is working that camera, knowing when you're cutting from one shot to another. What are the benefits of that? It's complicated. It's very complicated, because you have to think of lots of people's different jobs all in the one job you're doing. So, so keep all of that in mind if you want to be a storyboard artist. It's not just drawing pretty pictures on paper. It's being a filmmaker and doing what makes sense with sequential art. The drawing you draw in this frame has to somehow go along with the drawing in the next frame. You know, they're not standalone; they go together. So that's something that new people sometimes don't think about too, is the consistency of one drawing to the next and how they work together. All of animation is working together, whether it's making the story work together, but you're working with lots of other people. You got to be open to other people's suggestions and direction, and not feel precious about every little thing that comes out of your hand. So, yeah.
Solid advice.
It's a lot of advice. trying to make it concise is, I mean, they have whole courses in school these days about storyboarding, so it's a very broad subject. But if there's something you can take away from our discussion today, then great. Hopefully, it inspires some people to want to get into the business and make things even better than they are now.
Yeah.
Here's hoping.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Chad.
Yeah.
It was an absolute pleasure to have you.
Well, thank you for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, we're just kind of sort of starting. So this is like our like 13th-ish episode. So I'll probably send Lauren to bother you for contacts like eventually. So prepare your body for that.
Okay. Wait a minute. Prepare my body. Is this like a football player contact, or are you talking about something else?
And
It's a meme. It's basically just get ready, I guess. Don't worry, it's not anything like that.
All right. Very good.
I'll explain that if you explain to me what a laser disc is.
Oh. Well, if it's any
KP.
consolation, I may own laser discs, but I've never owned a laser disc player. By the time I was ready to get one, they were done. Laser discs are really big DVDs.
Okay. So like record player, like records, right?
Yes, records except they're video.
Okay.
there you go.
And they were double-sided, so yeah.
I'm just imagining like this projector with like a big recording like thing in the middle, like from school. But I'll look up pictures. It's fine.
Yeah. Just picture a DVD player that's 3 times the size.
Okay.
Yeah.
You connected it to your television.
Okay. Yeah. That probably makes more sense than just like trying to project it.
That was the step between videotapes and DVDs.
I did not know there was a step until today. See, I'm learning stuff too.
It's honestly, there's still stuff that were on some of the Disney Laserdiscs I have that they never put on DVD. So I wish I had a player. I'd like to see some of it.
Maybe that could be like a good charity thing. We'll like once I'm back in California, me and Lauren can go to like some Goodwill stores and be like, we're gonna get this on YouTube.
Well, I'll tell you this. If you had a Laserdisc player, that was the last time in the United States you could have gotten Song of the South.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
It was on Laserdisc. Yeah, it was on Laserdisc. So there.
Maybe someday, but
Someday. Yeah. If they even make one anymore, where can you buy anything like that except at a flea market?
Yeah, pretty much.
eBay is friend.
Yes. Well, eBay is the world's flea market, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Well, we'll let you go, and then we're.
If you don't mind, there's one thing I forgot to mention.
Oh
that
yeah,
I'm involved
he's
in.
got to plug the thing.
Yes,
Yeah,
please, plug,
I got something to plug. I'm currently I'm working with the Society of Illustrators of Los Angeles as the chairman of their Illustration West 59 art competition, and we just launched it recently here in May, and I got some amazing people that signed up to be judges for us. Drew Struzan, who did movie poster illustrations like Indiana Jones. Mike Mignola, who we talked about earlier, the creator of Hellboy. Jason Sealer, who's an amazing illustrator of books and magazines and album covers. He did Times Person of the Year cover at one point. C.F. Payne, who's done many children's books and magazine illustrations. Kadir Nelson, another amazing artist. He did a cover of National Geographic not too long ago, and he's got artwork in the National Gallery in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
Claire Keane, who, her grandfather was Bill Keane, who created Family Circus, and her dad is Glenn Keane. She's an amazing children's book illustrator and did production design and stuff for movies. And I have Susie Hutchinson, the art director of Mad Magazine, and Charlie Kochman, who is a creative director at Abrams Books, and Justin Gerard, who is a beautiful fantasy artist. Boy, his stuff is just amazing. So that's my judges panel, and we're really thrilled. The deadline for entries is October 31st, and you can just find it by going to illustrationwest.org.
Yeah, and we'll make sure we'll have a link available to that as well.
Very
So that
cool.
way we can share that with people. So thank you so much for plugging on
Yeah.
here and promoting that. And so we'll hopefully we'll get some listeners piling in on that as well. So
I do have a follow-up question. Are there certain prompts that you're doing that people are submitting, or is it just like a free-for-all where it's just like, just draw anything and we'll judge you? Like, how is the submission process going?
There's categories. So it is open to anybody, students, unprofessionals and professionals, but there are categories. So a lot of categories deal with published work. So the stuff has to have been published, whether it was for advertising or magazines or books or things like that. There are a couple of unpublished categories. I think there's a gallery category, and there's a self-promotional category. And then there's also specifically student categories, and there are scholarships. There are scholarships in the student category.
Free money.
There's money for there's three different prizes that have money for students. So there's when you go to illustrationwest.org, you can see the categories listed there and figure out which of your work fits into one of those categories.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Glad I clarified that or asked
Yeah.
that.
No, that's great. That's a good question.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
Thank you so much again for joining us tonight. And we were so excited to have you on board with us. And and we look forward to this, seeing what the competition brings on your end as well.
Yeah, I could
cool.
listen to animators ramble about old projects I still care about for hours. So
I'm just glad something I worked on you still care about. So that's important.
I mean, that's the good thing with Disney marketing and green eggs and ham in general. So
Indeed.
We'll do Storytime Part 2 at some point because we'll just make a Storytime podcast.
Yeah, half our guests, we keep on saying like, oh, we've only hit the surface. We'll have them back sometime. And then we're just like, look at this new person. So we'll figure it out. It's fine.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me tonight. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you
for
so
coming.
much. And
Yep, no problem. Thanks.
Good luck at your Animation Guild meeting.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to Animation Kimmunication on YouTube, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider. We are really hoping this show makes a difference in how people view animation and media, as well as giving and providing advice for people all over the world who like or want to join the animation or media industry. If you liked what you heard, please remember to subscribe and rate those 5 stars, as well as tell your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our main YouTube channel, I Love Kim Possible a Lot, and turn those notifications on. My name is Scribbler, and you have been listening to Animation Kimmunication.